Welcome to another episode of Hey Mama. This is going to be the part one in a three-part series where we're going to tell our origins as a husband and wife team of the Fit Mum method and the Fit Dad method. And this first episode about the origin of us is going to be Peter. And we're going to get to the bottom of how he grew up, what makes him the person that he is. And the next part of this series that we're going to do is about me and what makes me up, what makes the person that I am. And then in the third one, we are going to do the story of us. So who doesn't love a good love story? And I think that everyone will really enjoy our story on how we got together and what makes us who we are, and the team, the powerful team that we are, and also the parents that we are as well. So I'm going to ask the first question about Peter is, where did you grow up?
I grew up everywhere. And so I grew up in Western Sydney. So between, I would say, Windsor and Parramatta. I grew up in various different places. We moved around a fair bit, and I went to a few different schools in my childhood. And I moved to Adelaide in my teenage years, and then Dubbo, where I obviously met you in my young adult years. So yeah, it's a broad kind of area that I grew up in.
Why did you move around a lot? Was that for your parents? Was it for jobs? How come you moved around so much?
So I would probably say moved around a bit because, so we were embroiled in a family law battle for about 8 years. So from the age 4 to 12, that was a pretty significant part of life. And we moved for a variety of reasons, but I can only assume now that it was due to just renting and finding places to live after, being kicked out or something, or I'm not really sure. I moved schools a fair bit. So I went to South Windsor Public to start with, which then I moved to Parramatta, St Mary's actually. Was it St Mary's? Maryland's a Catholic school, and I think that was Dad's choice. And then I went to Parramatta Public. I went to St Michael's in Blacktown as well. So this was all happening around year 2, year 3, or year 1, year 2. And we were just told where to go.
So in primary school is where you moved around the most, would you say, before you got to high school?
Yeah, early primary school. So I spent a big chunk of time at St Michael's in Blacktown from year 2 to year 6.
Okay. And what was it like as a primary school kid? Did you like school? Did you not like school? Hated school? Why did you hate school?
I was the token fat boy. I was heavily bullied. There was kind of there was relentless actually, like at home was unstable and school was unstable as well. So yeah, I didn't really enjoy my young childhood.
And when you say bullied, relentless, what would happen? You were bullied because you were the token fat boy, or were you bullied for more than that?
I think I was just socially awkward, to be honest. On the outside, it was an easy thing to blame, being the token fat boy. But I look back on photos and I don't think I was really really that big to begin with, but I was being bullied. I think that came as a result, maybe eating my emotions or something like that. I do remember being in like size 32 pants in year 4, 5. The only way I know that is we were going to get some pants from Vinnie's or something like that. And that was, I didn't realize it at the time, but like now being in size 34 as a grown adult, I had pretty big hips. So I remember being bullied for like my big butt.
So people would say like, you know, that you had a big butt.
Yeah, like a bubble butt. And then mum would be like token mum and say, oh, girls will like that when you're older. But at the time, that didn't help.
And it offended you, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so then when you got to high school, what was that like? Did you get some more stability?
Yeah. So that was a really key defining kind of time of life. I remember being in year 6 at St. Michael's. There was a big group of boys that I would be bullied by. Now they're jocks, like they were the football boys. And they were going to...
They were bullying you at school, at high school?
No, this is in
this is still in year 6. Yeah. Okay, cool.
So at St. Michael's. And they were the football or the soccer boys. And I remember the names. That's how clearly I remember this period of life, right?
Yeah.
And I knew they were going to Patrician Brothers in Blacktown. So they were all going there. They're so excited because
I knew Patrician Brothers as well. It's all about football. If you're a good footballer, you go there.
Yeah. And I went there for a week, and I suppose with high school, and we're experiencing this now, it's a big mishmash of personalities, hierarchies, people who are cool in their older school coming in and trying to push their weight around. So very quickly, within the 7 days, everything went downhill. I didn't go there with friends, and then there were all of a sudden 5 times more bullies. So I was out of my depth and didn't have the confidence in that environment to even think about playing football. But as soon as I made the decision so by that stage, this is where everything came together, and a lot of different areas of life just blew up. By that stage, there were 8 years. 8 years had gone by in the family law courts. And this is like going back and forth at Parramatta Family Law. I'd be dragged in with Chris, or they'd be doing the fighting while we're at school or whatever. And then I just had enough. And there were talks of this between me and Chris, in like just getting the police involved and having an AVO out on my father so that it would all just stop. So I ran to the police station after school one day because I knew I wasn't being picked up by Dad but one of his friends. And then after about 3 or 4 hours at the police station in Blacktown, I left with an AVO against Dad, and that was the last I saw of him. It was the end of the family law case. We sent Chris over there for a couple more weeks, and it was just him alone with Dad. But by that stage, I think he was pretty defeated, and he just gave up.
Your dad was pretty defeated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why. So would you say that all ended because you got the police involved? So he decided to drop the case. Is that what happened?
Yeah, he probably stopped fighting for custody for us boys.
Yeah, because you went to the police and put the AVO out on him.
Yeah.
So was his decision to drop the case? Do you know that?
I don't know.
You don't know that for sure, but you just know that it was over. That the fighting was over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got to stay with Mum, which was what me and Chris were kind of always wanting. Was, oh my God, there's so much to like rehash to make things make sense. Yeah.
He's nervous, by the way, because he's normally the one that's been in control here. And so, you know, he was trying to get out of this. It was, oh, this isn't perfect and this and that. So you're doing pretty well. He doesn't like me being the one that's controlling the whole thing, or anybody for that matter. So, yeah, you've ended the 8 years of the fighting of your mum and dad over who gets the kids, you know, with your parents basically using you guys as a pawn in their relationship feud. So then you talk about the jocks, right? And that you didn't really get along with the jocks, or you were getting teased by the jocks and stuff. What do you reckon is a reason why you've never really bonded with the jock kind of?
With the boys?
Yeah, with the being a boy's boy.
Yeah, I'm not a boy's boy.
Yeah, so do you think that has something to do with growing up mainly with your mum?
Yeah, so for it all to make sense, I spent from 4 till around 6 living with mum, seeing dad on the weekends. 3 weekends out of 4 was the arrangement. And then mum went for 50-50 custody. Mum went for full custody. She wanted more weekends. And in that whole going for more, she actually ended up with less. It was 50-50.
Yeah, because back then, what are we talking? 1997? Yeah. 27. And that was where men were fighting for more rights. Or
the courts started getting jack, I think, of people just coming in and really, our case was the cornerstone case for family law around that time. It was being used as an example in law school, family law school. So I think the courts had just seen so much of the Magro Brown case that they were just like, you know what, you guys are never going to actually agree on anything. So we'll trial this. And it was a trial. They went to trial how 50-50 custody would work in a family law situation. And it became the precedent for years to come. Now, to this day, you go to court with your kids, it's 50-50 custody. So you
can spend all the money in the world, and then 9 times out of 10, you end up with 50-50, no matter what's happening in the household.
Yeah. And looking back, in that period of time when they were fighting over us, neither parent was more neglectful than the other. There was just personality clashes, and when I think about, it's very cloudy still. I still can't make sense of it all. But when I think about why I wanted to spend the most time with mum, it was because I was just drawn and more connected to her than I was dad. It was that simple. We would be on the computers a lot at dad's house. He worked, so we were often left in cars for a few hours on a weekend when he was working. So that was happening over there. But then again, that was happening with mum as well. It was the 90s, so they had to work to make money. So we were left at home while she was doing a sales rep job, or we were in the actual front window of a chemist while she did the exhibition building of some kind of Nicorette product or something like that.
And that's what you did back then in the 90s. Or if we were sick, we'd go to work with mum, because if we weren't old enough to just stay at home.
Now we feel so guilty about having our kids around while we're on the screen at home.
Working or taking them to the gym with us. Oh, that's so terrible.
Yeah.
And then so that you would more geared towards your mum, and now you're looking back with a zoomed out lens. But when you were in it, did you feel as though there was one parent better than the other?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
The story was that mum was better than dad.
Yeah.
And I think that's coming back to your question about why I've never been a boy's boy. I've always been in touch with my feminine side. I've always had that connection to mum. I was always told I was the man of the house, and that I was mum's rock, and that's kind of how I defined myself for a very long time. So in those primary years, I really struggled to connect with people, purely because I suppose we didn't have much stability or any structure. It wasn't as if we could connect over sport. So if I had people in primary school or in my class, they were off playing sport on the weekends. We were being shoved from Windsor, the Blacktown or Windsor. You know,
basically doing nothing. Yeah, you didn't have any common ground.
No common ground.
That's such a good point.
Any kids.
Yeah. So what would you go and connect with in the you know, out in the backyard, like where out in the schoolyard, you know, you think about Logie or you think about Miri, like they go and they, oh, you want to do cartwheels or you want to play mums and dads.
Yeah, I wasn't particularly physically skilled. So
but anything like that in terms of made up games or what about like with computers, you know, did you find any friends that had computers?
I had a lot of nerdy friends at that age. And I remember, you will relate to this, I remember going over to, his name was Thomas Valentine.
Valentine?
Yeah, he was this white boy. He was had the perfect family, like the mum, the dad that were together. Went over his house, 2-story house, beautiful house. And I remember going over there, and then I remember really, I couldn't understand why. And I'm getting the feeling again as I'm talking about it, but I wanted to get out of that place. Like
Has it made you feel so uncomfortable?
So uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So uncomfortable, and I didn't like it. And our friendship faded from there. There was another guy, his last name, I can't remember his first name, Mansell, his last name. And it was the same thing, like went over to his house and just went to get out of there.
Because you feel so uncomfortable and you don't like to feel uncomfortable. Right. I've noticed over the years you will dart and run away from that.
Yeah, like I could probably die out of this.
Okay, so then high school, it took a pivotal turn. So we started talking about patrician brothers, and it lasted like a week. You know, you don't get along with jock boys. And when you go to patrician brothers, I don't know if anybody has heard of it before, but I grew up, and I suppose we connected on this as well later on in another episode. We'll talk about that. But like being, you know, Westies, Sydney Westerners, little did we even know that we were growing up in similar places or similar areas, and so now these days we totally connect on this kind of thing. But we knew back in going to Camden High School that you know, you're a good footballer, that's where you should go, is Patrician Brothers. So why were you thrown into Patrician Brothers anyway? Because you hadn't actually even started any sport at this stage.
So Dad was Catholic. I was baptised Roman Catholic, and it was very important for him to have us at a Catholic school. So more context, we went to South Windsor Public because Mum enrolled us in the school. Then they went to court, and through court they decided that we should go to a Catholic school. So Dad got his way there. So we went to Maryland's, and the only reason we went to Maryland's was because his family were close by. So I'm guessing his idea was that I'd be able to walk to Nana's and finish school. And then for some reason I was ripped out of that school, put back into Parramatta, and then within a week went back to Maryland's public school. And then I can't even remember the time frame between going back there to then going now to St Michael's. But I would say what happened was Mum negotiated closer into Blacktown. It's all where she could get a house. Yeah, it was cheaper out there living.
Yeah, more affordable. For sure.
So we were going to St Michael's, and then the natural pathway from St Michael's was Patrician Brothers. They were linked schools.
Okay.
And then you had Naval Girls or something. I can't remember the girls' school, but it was attached to St Michael's, and it was the girls' school. So we went from St Michael's. I went from St Michael's to Patrician Brothers purely for the fact that it was Catholic, and that was the pathway. So lasted 7 days at Patrician Brothers, and in hindsight, had I probably stuck that out, I probably would have really become a good football player.
So I was going to say,
deep regret, because I ran from that, which wasn't the first thing that I ran from. I remember I ran from kickboxing grading, and I wish I had done it, knowing what I know now. So I ran from Patrician Brothers and landed in Evans High School in Blacktown. So Evans High School wasn't the greatest school, definitely not as prestigious as Patrician Brothers. But having been able to go there, it was a fresh start, and I could create any persona that I desired.
Because no one knew you.
No one knew me,
Yeah.
and it was a
significant
break from the family law that had been the complete definition of my life up to that point. So it was kind of like a clean slate. And so that's where I went to Evans High School. And funnily enough, Mum had a new boyfriend on the scene. By that stage, he was about 12 months into a relationship with Mum, and he used to play football. So Chris wanted to play football, and I was like, oh yeah, you know what, I'll play football too.
Chris is your younger brother.
Chris is my younger brother. So we ended up playing football for Minchinbury Jets, and I ended up being really good. Like I played under 12s. It was my first season, and I remember the first game that I played, I absolutely sucked. I had no idea what I was doing. And the way that I had learned how to play was I was told by one of the trainers to watch Tomato Tahu on the wing the night before, because Newcastle was playing Parramatta, I think it was, in that actual game. And he said, just do what Tomato Tahu does. I'm like, okay. So I stood out on the wing, and when the ball came to me, I'm pretty sure I dropped it. It wasn't the best game, but I persevered, and I played my second game. And in my second game, just purely for the fact that I was a big boy, I came in and I hit this guy on the leg, and I broke his femur. And from then on, like, my whole team just loved me.
You were like the hero.
I was the hero. That poor dude that broke his femur, I was the start of the comp.
You still feel bad about that to this day, don't you? But at the same time, it defined you. And
it's bittersweet.
Yeah,
it was a bittersweet moment, because I had found something. They called me Bulldozer. It was my first nickname ever. And then this little Aboriginal boy come up to me at training, and he goes, Pete, I thought you were really shit when I first saw you play. But then I found out that you've never actually played in your entire life. So well done.
And you guys became friends, right?
Yeah, we became friends.
Yeah.
He was cool.
Yeah.
So I played under 12s, and then I played under 13s. And under 13s was when I kind of came into my own. I got like 7 or 8 men of the matches that year.
I suppose that it was just sparked you to keep going, right?
Yeah.
First the nickname, the knowing how, like, that you were actually strong. So before in primary school, you were told you had a big bubble butt and you felt like you were fat and all that kind of thing, and then you came into playing your game of football, and then you actually got some compliments, feedback, some actual positive.
My big legs, they helped,
right? And I remember, like seeing him for the first time, thinking, oh, he's got footballer legs.
So and then at high school, I really enjoyed Evans High School for the first half of the time that I spent there. And I see this in other people too, I had masked this actual real Pete that was underneath. So I pretended that I was the cool kid. I pretended I was the jock. I started bullying other people to just put myself above them in that pecking order, because all I knew was bullied or bully.
Hurt people.
Yeah.
And it's a dog-eat-dog world in school.
Yeah. So looking back on that, that's not something I'm proud of, but like, it was survival. For me, because I
think we can all relate to that. Like, it's a jungle out there, and it is survival of the fittest. Yeah. But what makes you a better person is that you can look back on that and not be proud of it and take responsibility for it.
Yeah, definitely.
You didn't continue to do it.
No, like, I think for the next few years, things started to get rocky again, in terms of stability and as an adult now, I look back on that and I think, did I make the right choice in the pathway that I went in terms of who I chose, which parent I chose to go with, because it got pretty bad. Far worse than family law.
So you had a little bit of stability there where things had, it's like a movie, right? Things go like, it's all struggle town, and then things go really well for a while, and you think, okay, my life is sorted, and then things go down the shitter again. Yeah.
We reached new lows.
Yeah.
So where do I begin on this one? So there was a lot of domestic violence in the house halfway through year 7, and a lot of manipulation from the boyfriend.
Yeah, mum's boyfriend. So you really didn't get much of a break.
No,
for year 7, halfway
months.
through the year. Yeah, 6 months.
6 months.
6 months of a bit of freedom.
Yeah.
A bit of stability.
Yeah. So that was a very volatile relationship. It was volatile before family law court stops. So I shouldn't have been surprised that it continued. But I had my mind set on being with mum so much that it didn't matter. Mum also had Taylor, my eldest.
She had another baby with this new guy.
Yeah, so that's just like further solidified the reason I wanted to sort of stay with mum.
Yeah.
And then after probably 6 months of having that breather at high school, we decided that mum decided that she would move to Adelaide, and she'd always wanted to because her parents were down in Kangaroo Island. So we moved down there, and probably spent a whole term moving down there. Like,
God, so this is still in year 7? Yeah. So I move again.
Yeah, a big move.
Yeah.
And at the point of which we moved, there was a blow up between mum and Paul. So at the very decision of moving, they blew up, and we moved there without him, but he ended up coming after mum went back to get some stuff, and then she brought him back. I'm not sure, I can't speak to that. That was a very toxic relationship, but he ended up coming down with us, and all the way up to that point, I can remember like being in places like missionary jets, and they would fight while we were having a barbecue down there. It was so fucking embarrassing. Yeah. I would, be at St Mary's Coles, and they would fight in the car park over her mum hearing from an ex. Yeah. So it was always very volatile, and there were situations where we were out at like Penrith Panthers. They had a fight at the Panthers club. We'd go home by ourselves. He'd walk all the way back from Penrith Panthers, jump through the window and bleed all over the bed because he cut himself as he broke in the house. So
very toxic.
There was a lot of toxicity, and then he ended up coming down to Adelaide. Actually coming over to Kangaroo Island. So we were on a island, third largest island in Australia, and it was this secluded country town, thrown into year 8, and they all played AFL. So all of a sudden I'm this gay Sydney dude from Oxford Street who played rugby league, similar to that of Hawaii. So I stuck my finger up people's bums, and I was back in that whole bullying
stage again. Yeah.
So I I find it hard not to think that I've probably attracted some of it, and you're shaped by your environment, the people around you. So I didn't have the best environment.
That's right. So it wasn't that you attracted it; it was the environment that you were being brought up in. Yeah. Unfortunately, not to any fault of your own. It's just the cards that you dealt with.
Yeah. So from there, I felt I'm going to fast forward heaps here because there's a lot of toxicity still. Mum had Jamie, my youngest of my 2 sisters, and she had her on in Adelaide. So we'd moved to Adelaide while Mum was pregnant. We moved to Adelaide because the medical facilities over on Kangaroo Island weren't the greatest, and I was accident prone. I fell off my bike and I ripped my jaw open. So from my lip down to the very bottom of my chin, I had a cut on the inside of my mouth, probably about that wide, all the way down. So I had to go over to Adelaide Dental Hospital, and one of the fantastic dentists there washed out my mouth. There was grass seed growing in the mouth. They stitched it up, 60 stitches from the inside of my lip to my around my teeth. Luckily, I didn't really get much of a
You didn't get, you don't have any scars or anything like that. Like, I can't believe.
But I spent 7 days with that gash, that big open wound, because there was no dental hospital on the island.
On Kangaroo Island.
And the only way to get out was through a hospital evac, which would be just completely out of the budget. So we had to wait until the seas. This sounds really far out, like a bloody novel or something. But we had to wait till the ocean settled down for the ferries to start running again, so we could catch a ferry from Penashore to Victor Harbour, drive 2 hours up to Adelaide, see this dental surgeon, have my mouth fixed, and then I stayed at my uncle's for about a week until we got into a home up in Adelaide. And then that's where I started Parry Hills High, which was another fresh start. And you know what? Parry Hills High, like, that was amazing.
That was the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was good at rugby league. They didn't play AFL at the school.
Okay.
Which it was.
Was it Kangaroo Island that did the AFL?
Yeah.
And that's where you were, you were like, indifferent again.
Yes.
So okay. So they do rugby league in Adelaide?
They didn't play rugby league in Adelaide. So they didn't play, they played AFL in Adelaide, but this particular school that I went to didn't have like AFL as their main sport. So that meant that there was no one there that was in these boys groups. And I actually started to look around. There were some rugby league clubs that were in Adelaide, and I started playing for them. And then somewhere along the line, I can't remember exactly how I did it, but I ended up convincing the PE teacher to put together a rugby league team, and I convinced him that I could coach it.
How old were you then? This was year 8 or you?
Yeah, it was year 8.
Year 8.
Year 8, year 9.
That's some cocky shit.
Probably
right
year
there.
9, I think.
Yeah.
I was 15. Yeah. And the only reason I had that cocky confidence was because I was playing for these mediocre clubs, and I was just completely like shredding them up. Because I was this kid from Sydney who knew how to play league, and I was big, and I was fast, and I was strong, and I could pass the ball, and I could catch the ball, and I had skills with step. So
you're like the big fish in a little pond now.
Yeah, I was the big fish in the little pond. I won a grand final. I scored like 3 or 4 tries in that grand final, and it was the club that was the shittest club around. So I took them from being really crappy to like being premiers for the year. I coached them as well. So I coached the actual club. I coached the high school. I had this little book that I carry around. Like, do you remember Waterboy and how the coach in Waterboy had his little playbook?
Yeah, kind of. A playbook.
Yeah, he had his playbook stolen off and he lost all his confidence. So I had my own little playbook that I would write in like that. And these are the plays, H2O. And these are the plays that I'd use in the football team. I played for state, so I got to go to Perth. I played up in Rockhampton for South Australia.
Went to New Zealand?
I went to New Zealand for a little bit. Yeah. Got homesick and came back.
You ran away from that one
too. Yeah. It's crazy. But that whole period of Parry Hills High was probably one of my best years as a kid.
Yeah.
Because I got to just figure it out, and there was like I got to a point where I was big enough to push Paul out of our lives. So
I was gonna say, like, when did you start lifting weights?
Yeah, so I started lifting weights in the backyard around about the same time that I started at Parrot Hills. And purely it was because I was interested in girls. So I wanted to put on a little bit of size. I was wanting to look good. I was a bit scrawny after I lost all the weight after starting to play footy.
Yeah, so you lost weight because of football, right?
Yeah.
So you started to go from the chubby boy to the like skinny boy.
Yeah.
So then you, what would have made you, like, you're interested in girls, but what made you think that that's what girls wanted? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Paul.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he had a bit of an
Paul
influence
had a
on you.
huge influence, even though I don't like to admit it. Yeah, I've seen the negative influence come out a few times.
Yeah.
Since some like behaviours that I've picked up, but with Paul, the story was, you know, if you're a good root, you'll get talked about. The girls on the sideline will want you. You've got to be big and muscly. And I was taking all this advice from this fucking fraud. Like, honestly, I look at him now, he was a complete ugly nut dude that just was trying to hide his own insecurities. Around about the same time, like, mum gave me a porn magazine when I was 13. It was just a really toxic masculine sexuality story that was weaved into my puberty, and that paved the way for me to think, oh, it's all about being, you know, big and macho and strong, looking a certain way, acting a certain way, and treating women a certain way as well. So that's opened up some conversation. A whole new topic.
Yeah, that's okay though.
Yeah, so that's basically the story that was leading to why I started lifting weights. Yeah.
So you started lifting weights.
Yeah.
And I was going to bring up the topic about how then you started to become popular with the girls.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're playing football, started lifting weights. I know that there was another reason why you wanted to lift weights as well, and you mentioned it before about Paul.
Yeah. So I didn't know it at the time, but by lifting weights, I would be stronger, and then I'd be able to, you know, push him around because he'd push mum around a fair bit. There's a few different reasons why I started lifting weights. Yeah. So
you got to push Paul out?
Yeah. So we got drunk one day. He was nose to nose with mum, and I had this overwhelming fight in me to get between them, go nose to nose with him, and send him out the door. So I was sitting out the door, and he fell on his ass, and he got up. And he was so angry. And I was in a moment of, holy shit, I just did that. I'm in the shit now.
Or those things that you do and you don't think about the actual repercussions.
And I sprinted down the street as fast as I could, because I knew that if I can get him running in that direction, don't ask me how I knew to do that.
Well, you spent how many years was Paul in your life for? Or your stepdad? Well, you know, it wasn't legally your stepdad, but
So he was in my life year 5. So year 5, year 6, 7, 8. By year 9, I was big enough to get rid of him.
To push him out. So year 9, so you were like 16, 15, 16?
15.
Yeah, 15, 16 when you were pushing him out. So you've known his behaviours for a long time, and people think that, I don't know how many people think this, but some people think that kids are silly.
Yeah.
Right? They think that we don't pick up on things as a child, and we're resilient and all this kind of thing, but we actually are there in the midst of it.
Yeah.
So you would have studied his behaviour and would have known.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew that I could get, I suppose in hindsight, I probably knew if I can get him angry enough, I could have him chase me down the street, and then I knew I was agile enough to get around him because I'd been playing football. So I used that to my advantage. I ran back into the house, shut the door, locked the door, and that was it. It was gone. Mum called Uncle John. Uncle John came down and sorted him out. Yeah.
Yeah. And how was that for you?
Oh, it was another breath of fresh air. Like it was another start over moment, because from there, then it was just me, Chris, and the two girls. He really took a very he shrunk into this little corner of our lives, to where he like went down a bad path, and yeah, he's gone now. So yeah, that was another defining moment, and then that was where I really just started to rebel. And I was never home. I was walking all over Adelaide. Mum didn't know where I was. I don't know if she really cared, in the sense of she knew that I could take care of myself.
Yeah, and she had Chris. She had
Chris.
The two young girls as well. Yeah, so she was probably like, at capacity, or her life was filled with other duties.
Yeah, and I think back to those times too, and I think, holy shit, how did I get through that?
I think we all do in the teenage years. We think back to, how do we even survive that? Or there were many situations where it could have been far worse. Yeah. So you started rebelling, but you also, you were having fun as a teenager, but you were also lifting weights. And then, pretty early on, you got a job in the gym, right?
Yeah. So I did a lot of drinking.
Yep.
And I stayed away from the drugs, thankfully. But I did a lot of drinking, binge drinking, and I was hanging around in clubs at 16 in Adelaide, because I had older friends that could get me in. So that was really kind of from 16 to 18. I did a lot of partying, and then I got a job at the gym. And that was the first time that I thought I could really make myself into another person. And I got obsessed with it. I could make money out of that passion that I had for weights, and that's where I got into the fitness industry.
And it kind of kept you in the straight and narrow too. Like if you have an obsession with lifting weights and looking after yourself, then that other stuff falls away. Yeah,
big time. So I'm very lucky that I met the people that I did. So it was all a really interesting process. I had blown my ACL out playing touch football, which then caused me to not be able to complete the physical component of PE, which was part of my points that I needed for the equivalent of the HSC. I can't remember what I called it back then. It was just a Year 12 certificate. So I couldn't complete the Year 12 certificate. And I got some work experience at a gym, having already done, there was a Cert 2 in fitness back then, and then I did a Cert 3 in fitness. So I got some work experience at a gym, and that's where I met Ash. And Ash took me under his wing, and he ended up convincing them to give me a job after the work experience. So I was doing kids fun fitness, and that's where I met Daniel. So Daniel, you're listening, mate.
If he listens to the Hey Mama podcast,
there's your shout out.
Or his wife should be.
Yeah. And I was being paid to muck around with these kids, teach them fitness, and
so fun, right?
Yeah, and also take some supervised personal training back then. So I was told that if I wanted the best chance of getting a job there, I needed to go and do a Les Mills certificate, and I was also paid for to do that. So they forked out the $500 to send me to Les Mills.
I mean, Les Mills was massive back then.
Body pump. Yeah. So I learned how to teach body pump, and nerdy fat boy bodybuilder to learning choro. It was an interesting process, but a really awesome time of my fitness career looking back on that too. I learned how to speak to groups of people that were looking at me and following my instructions. I learned how to teach and coach and public speaking skills, and I really got out of my shell at that stage in a good way. So for a lot of years there, it was getting out of my shell in the wrong way,
Mm-hmm.
in the way that I had been taught. And Paul was an alcoholic.
So yeah, you had that kind of environment around you as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a young kid that's a bit lost, without the support and that someone to reel you back in, you are going to go down that path because it's the easiest path and it's just right there.
Yeah. So that's where I started my own business as well. I ran that out of a cash tin, and I started bodybuilding as well. And that was a whole new kind of roller coaster ride.
Yeah, and you and your mum did this bodybuilding journey together.
Yeah, so I started bodybuilding, and I met I met a coach through the gym, and maybe 6 months later, Mum inquired with the same coach, and then we started competing. She would do her division, and I'd do mine. So we did that for about 3 years, and in between comp seasons, that's where I'd go out and be an 18-year-old, 19-year-old.
Get loose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was probably not the best time of my life to be doing something like competing in bodybuilding.
Definitely not. But we all do things that, we all make mistakes, or we all do things that we
I thought that
look back.
Make me more of a desirable choice when it comes to personal training, which it did. I looked like I knew my shit.
Of course, yeah.
So it taught me a lot about food and about diet and about behavior, and gave me a lot of stories to be able to use to help people change their habits now. So
you've got all that experience behind you, plus the experience that we've had together.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, even though you think it probably wasn't the best choice, it's made you up for who you are. And fast forward a bit, how did you end up in Dubbo?
So
we won't talk about how we met. I think we're going to leave it. We're going to leave it there.
Okay. So I was, where was this? I was in Adelaide still, bodybuilding. Mum had met someone online who lived in Dubbo. So she ended up marrying him and moving there. And when she married and moved, I had the choice to stay in Adelaide or go with. So I stayed in Adelaide for a few months.
So how old were you here? Like 20 by now?
Yeah. 20. No, 19.
19?
Yeah. Would have been 19, maybe 18 to 19, I think, because I spent a few months there in Adelaide. I came up to Dubbo for Christmas holidays, and then I got to Dubbo, but I'd met someone before I left Dubbo for that Christmas holidays, so I wanted to get back to her, my friends. So I moved back. And the way I moved back was from Dubbo, took a bus all the way to the border of New South Wales, and then I had her pick me up. We broke up on the trip back to Adelaide.
What, in the car?
We stayed in, she had some friends that were camping by the river.
Yeah.
And we went kneeboarding and stuff. And then one of those nights, she got drunk and I was pissed off, and we broke it off because she was hanging out with some guys and I was insecure. So that was what broke that up.
Yeah.
And then I ended up landing at a mate's house, and I lived in Adelaide for a good 12 months after that. So I hopped around houses. I stayed with him for a bit. They were expecting, and then it was pretty clear that I wouldn't be able to stay there. So I found another place to live at where we house shared. That was for about 6 months, and then I ended up house sharing with a mate who did some bodybuilding, which it didn't work out because we were both carb depleted and cranky AF. So by the end of that 12 months, I had, and I've never really said this out loud, but I had absolutely no capacity to take care of myself and actually, build a career and do all of that.
Because you depleted yourself through bodybuilding, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you had enough.
Yeah. So I got fired from the job that I had as a PT because I was selling diets on the side, diet plans on the side, and supplements on the side. And I've always had this entrepreneurial, rebellious attitude, streak, and it's never really helped me with my employment. So I moved to Adelaide. So I moved to Dubbo with this story in my head that I'm leaving Adelaide because I, used up everything down there. Start fresh again. This is a pattern for me.
Are you just realizing as you're talking? Yeah.
Start fresh again. And I'll think back to all the video games I used to play as a kid.
Yeah. Oh, and if you stop up, you press pause and start again. Oh, yeah. Yeah. My brother used to do that all the time. It's like, oh, I made a mistake right there at the start. Nah, I'm starting again. Yeah. Okay.
So
reset, restart.
So I reset again.
Yeah.
And I had the story in my head that I would never be in the gym again.
Oh, yes. You were done with fitness.
I was done with fitness. I just wanted a 9-to-5 job, a desk job.
Yeah.
Because that was my view of what I could do.
Yeah.
But my only skill was actually being in a gym.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a job at a local gym there as a receptionist.
As a receptionist.
Yeah. And that's how I got to know.
Cool.
I won't give too much more away.
Okay, so we're doing these episodes in between our guests or my guests episodes. And if you are only just listening to this series, go back and listen to series 1 where we talk, it's all about my experiences as a mum and a mum of 2 and then a mum of a child that didn't sleep, and why I'm so passionate about the Fit Mum method and the way that we coach our clients and, and both mums and dads and families. So that's why this series, we thought we're going to do something a little bit different. So you got to know me and that experience there. So now, and we got really good feedback from that. People really enjoyed listening to that. And Pete's always putting me under the hot seat. So I thought we would do a bit of a different kind of series this time and get to know us as individuals and then us together. So stay tuned for series 2, and that would be the origin of me.
Am I going to interview you?
Yeah, you're going to interview me.
Cool.
Yeah.
See ya.
Bye. Actually, these. Do you want to see these?
Yeah.
While we're filming.
Yeah. Show me.
All right. So I pulled out these. I always ask my guides to give me messages on what's the clear message that our audience needs to get out, and what's the clear message that my guest needs to receive, and what is the message that I need to receive, because we're all receiving here. So I pulled this before. Pete didn't want to see it. He wanted to see it on the podcast. And the first one that came up was feelings. And the second one that came up was breaking free.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff we talked about today was kind of like breaking free of, your patterns and behaviors and your upbringing.
Yeah, I had to feel that all over again.
Yeah, and I could see it in your face too.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable at all after that whole conversation. Like it was just, it was a lot there. But
then it's purging.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and you probably won't feel comfortable until tomorrow morning when you've slept on it.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Mama. You can find all the relevant links, including socials, in the description section of this podcast. If you want to find out more information about how I can help you build your best body after babies, then visit my website, www.thefitmummethod.com, for more info. Lastly, before you leave here today, if you've enjoyed listening, then please subscribe and share so you can help me to reach out to those mamas that also need to listen too.